There are moments in history when a single image becomes more than just a photograph. It becomes evidence of a truth no one was ever meant to see. In 1881, one such image surfaced in the heart of Europe. It appeared ordinary at first, a king and a young man posing together. But hidden within its composition was a scandal so deep it could shatter a dynasty. It exposed the secret life of a monarch, a man remembered as the Mad King of Bavaria, but whose madness may have been nothing more than forbidden love. This is the untold story of Ludwig II, the king who built fairy tale castles to hide his reality, whose brilliance and passion were turned against him, and whose death remains one of the most haunting mysteries in royal history. In 1881, a photograph was taken that should never have existed. In it, a young Hungarian actor sat confidently in an ornate chair while the King of Bavaria, one of Europe's most powerful monarchs, stood beside him like a servant. In the rigid hierarchy of royal protocol, such an image was unthinkable. A king never stood while a commoner sat. The only explanation for this impossible scene was that the man in the chair was something far more significant than anyone dared to admit. When copies of the photograph reached Munich, ministers who saw it immediately grasped the danger. It wasn't simply a breach of etiquette, it was an exposure. After 2 decades of carefully orchestrated secrecy, the king's most perilous truth was suddenly visible for all to see. That single photograph set in motion a chain of events that would end with 2 bodies floating in a lake. A fisherman paid for his silence, and a mystery that Germany still keeps locked away in classified archives. The world remembers King Ludwig II as the Mad King of Bavaria, the dreamer who built the castle that inspired Disney's fairy tale kingdom. Neuschwanstein, perched high on a Bavarian cliff. 6 million tourists visit it every year, enchanted by its beauty. Yet few know that behind its spires and secret passageways lay something darker. Every tower and hidden chamber was designed to conceal what was happening when the king turned night into day, living in darkness and sleeping through the light. Because Ludwig II had discovered something that could have destroyed him if it ever came to light. In darkness, he could finally be himself. He could finally love whom he truly loved. This is the story of how one forbidden photograph unveiled a shadow kingdom built on secrecy. A world where a king who could not love women created an elaborate realm of night to live freely. A world illuminated by cutting-edge electric lights glowing in underground grottos, where servants were paid fortunes to forget what they saw, until one night the wrong people found out. And when they did, they decided the king had to die. June 13th, 1886. Lake Starnberg, Bavaria. 10:30 p.m. 2 bodies float in the shallow water. One belongs to Dr. Bernhard von Gutten, Bavaria's most respected psychiatrist, his face scratched, his neck bearing marks of strangulation. The other is Ludwig II, King of Bavaria, aged 40. His watch had stopped at 6:54 p.m. The official report declared suicide by drowning. But Ludwig was an excellent swimmer. No water was found in his lungs. And the fisherman who discovered the bodies received mysterious payments for the rest of his life. Payments that somehow made him mayor of his small town. To understand why a king ended up dead in a lake, why a doctor was strangled, and why a fisherman was paid to stay silent, the story must go back to where it all began, to the moment this beautiful, doomed prince first discovered the truth about himself. Munich, 1863. Ludwig was 18 when he met the man who would change everything and ultimately destroy him. Prince Paul von Thurn-Uendi taxis entered Ludwig's life in the uniform of an aide-de-camp, all gold buttons and perfect posture. Ludwig had seen handsome men before. The Bavarian court was filled with them. But Paul was different. When their eyes met across the throne room, something electric passed between them. Something that in 1863 Bavaria had no safe name. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Paul visited Ludwig's chambers late at night, long after the court had gone to bed. Their official letters were formal and polite, but hidden deep in the royal archives were others, ones that survived only because someone forgot to burn them. Dear and beloved Ludwig, Paul wrote in one. My heart beats only for you. When I see the light in your window, I know you are thinking of me. I am consecrated to you, body and soul." Ludwig wrote back with a passion that would one day be used as evidence of his insanity. "You are the sun in my darkness. When you are away, I cannot eat or sleep. I pace my chambers like a caged animal until you return. But the walls of a royal court have eyes, and servants whisper." Within months, rumors began to spread through Munich's beer halls, whispers that the prince preferred the company of his aide-de-camp to that of any princess. Something had to be done. Ludwig's mother, Queen Marie, acted first. She summoned Paul to a private audience. No record survives of what was said, but that same night, Paul was transferred to a post in Prussia. He never returned. Ludwig's first heartbreak came with a brutal lesson. Love, for him, would always mean loss. But in the months that followed, something else began to change. He started missing morning meetings, then arriving late to afternoon councils. By winter, courtiers noted he was rarely seen before sunset. "His Majesty," one minister wrote, "seems to have developed an aversion to daylight itself." They believed it was grief. They were only half right, because Ludwig had discovered that in darkness, he could live without fear. When the sun went down, the mask of the perfect prince, the future king expected to marry and produce heirs, could finally come off. Then in 1864, everything changed again. King Maximilian II died suddenly, and at just 18 years old, Ludwig became king. The crown weighed 3.5 pounds, but to Ludwig, it felt like 1,000. Because now the expectations were not just personal, they were political. The dynasty's survival depended on him doing the one thing he could never do: love a woman. They tried, of course, but the world of daylight was no longer his. In 1867, the Bavarian court erupted with joy when King Ludwig II announced his engagement to Princess Sophie Charlotte, the younger sister of Empress Elizabeth of Austria, better known to the world as Sisi. Sophie was everything a future queen was expected to be: beautiful, intelligent, poised, and gracious. The wedding was scheduled for August 25th, Ludwig's birthday, and it was to be one of the most magnificent royal events in Europe. Invitations were sent to courts across the continent. The press hailed the engagement as a uniting of two noble houses, and the people of Bavaria finally believed their young, eccentric king had found stability and love. Yet behind the public excitement, something within Ludwig began to unravel. As the wedding day drew near, the king's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He postponed the ceremony once, then again, citing vague reasons and conflicting excuses. His letters became scattered and distant, his appearances at court more infrequent. By autumn, whispers spread through Munich that the king was avoiding his bride altogether. Finally, in October, Ludwig summoned Princess Sophie for a private meeting at the palace. What was said between them would later be recounted in Sophie's own memoirs. With visible pain, the king confessed, "I cannot do this to you. You deserve a husband who can love you completely. I am not that man. I will never be that man." It was a devastating moment, yet Sophie's response was one of remarkable grace. She did not protest or demand an explanation. Instead, she accepted his words with quiet understanding. The engagement was officially broken, and though the scandal rippled through European society, Sophie never spoke ill of Ludwig. She never married another man, once telling a confidant, "How could I, after being loved by Ludwig?" But she was wrong in one regard: Ludwig's heart had never truly belonged to her. Long before their engagement, he had already fallen deeply and secretly in love with someone else. That someone was Richard Hornig, a stable master in the royal stables, a man of modest birth who first entered Ludwig's life in 1866. Hornig was blond, blue-eyed, and strikingly handsome, with the kind of classical features one might find in a Renaissance sculpture. Ludwig noticed him almost immediately, drawn to his calm demeanor and quiet loyalty. Hornig was everything Ludwig's earlier companion, the theater page Paul, had been, but with one crucial difference. Hornig's humble origins meant that their closeness could be dismissed as mere favoritism, not scandal. Or so Ludwig thought. Within a year, Hornig's life had changed dramatically. He was promoted from groom to master of the horse, then elevated again to personal equerrier role that granted him constant access to the king's most private moments. Ludwig showered him with gifts, a grand annual salary, a lakeside estate, and the most coveted privilege in all of Bavaria, unrestricted entry into the king's private chambers at any hour. In his secret diary, discovered only after his death, Ludwig referred to Hornig as Die Gallipe Manassala, which translates roughly to the beloved of my soul. But those same diary pages reveal a man at war with himself. On one page, Ludwig wrote impassioned declarations of love, calling Hornig his only light in a world of shadow. On the next, he begged God for forgiveness, promising to resist the temptation that tormented him. I am damned, he wrote in 1869, but damnation with him is sweeter than salvation alone. The conflict between his spiritual guilt and his earthly longing consumed him. It was during this period that Ludwig conceived an extraordinary idea, one that would forever define his legacy. He would build a castle, not for politics or war, but as a sanctuary for his imagination. It would rise from a cliff so steep that only a narrow bridge could reach it, a bridge that could be destroyed at the king's command if ever threatened. He named it Neuschwanstein, the new swan stone. To most historians, it was an extravagant dream born from Wagnerian fantasy. But what they failed to recognize was that every inch of Neuschwanstein was built for privacy and concealment. Secret passages linked the chambers. Hidden doors allowed servants to appear and vanish unseen. And even the magnificent throne room, decorated with radiant Byzantine mosaics of saints and angels, lacked one essential object: the throne itself. Ludwig never intended to hold court there. Neuschwanstein was not a palace of rule, but a palace of refuge, a fortress of secrets. By 1869, Ludwig's transformation into the so-called Night King had begun. His life reversed entirely. Meetings once held in the bright hours of the day were moved to dusk, then to midnight. By the early 1870s, nearly all royal business occurred after dark. Servants whispered that their king had become a creature of night. By 1875, his schedule was completely inverted. He rose at 7 p.m., breakfasted at midnight, took lunch at 3 a.m., and dined at sunrise before finally retreating to bed. To the outside world, this was madness. To Ludwig, it was liberation. Historians later described this behavior as eccentricity or evidence of mental decay. But in truth, Ludwig had built a hidden realm that few ever glimpsed, a shadow kingdom that existed only under the cover of darkness. Within it lived those who, like him, did not belong to the daylight world. Actors, musicians, and servants chosen not for their lineage, but for their loyalty and beauty. At the heart of this nocturnal court was Richard Hornig, now nearly inseparable from the king. But there were others, young performers from Munich's theaters, invited after midnight plays to dine, sing, and dance within the private halls of Neuschwanstein. At Linderhof Palace, Ludwig constructed one of his strangest and most mesmerizing creations, the Venus Grotto. Officially, it was described as a tribute to Wagner's opera Tannhauser, in which the hero visits the goddess Venus in her glowing subterranean realm. But the grotto's true purpose was far more intimate. It was an artificial cave, 90 meters long, with a heated lake and a private power station, the first in Germany built solely to illuminate Ludwig's hidden world. Colored electric lights could bathe the cavern in red for passion, blue for melancholy, or green for jealousy. In the center floated a golden boat shaped like a seashell, where the king would drift for hours, often accompanied by one of his chosen companions. The grotto was a masterpiece of control. Its lights could be dimmed or extinguished in an instant if an uninvited guest appeared. The servants who maintained it were handpicked and lavishly paid to ensure absolute discretion. Yet even the highest wages could not buy total silence. By 1880, disturbing rumors began to reach the Bavarian ministers. Reports surfaced that the king demanded his young male attendants perform private dances, stripped of their uniforms, adorned only with garlands of flowers. One dismissed valet described these secret spectacles as performances that would shame a Roman emperor. He wrote that Ludwig would watch from a candlelit throne, his eyes fixed on the dancers, occasionally beckoning one forward to whisper commands. These stories might have remained buried in government archives, dismissed as slander, if not for what happened the following year. In 1881, Ludwig attended a performance at the Munich Court Theater where a 23-year-old actor named Joseph Keynes appeared in Victor Hugo's Marion Delorme. Keynes was talented, but not yet famous. Yet something about him ignited the king's fascination. That very night, Ludwig sent a royal summons. Most actors would have been terrified to meet the reclusive monarch known for his unpredictable moods, but Keynes was intrigued. Their first meeting lasted until dawn. No record exists of what they discussed, but within a week, Ludwig invited him on a private journey to Switzerland not as an entertainer, but as a companion. From that moment forward, the boundaries between royal duty and forbidden desire began to blur beyond recognition. The fairy tale king of Bavaria had built his own kingdom of dreams, one that glowed only under moonlight and thrived in secrecy. But as history would soon reveal, the world outside that dream was waiting to tear it apart. The trip to Switzerland in May 1881 was meant to be a secret. King Ludwig II of Bavaria traveled under the alias Count Fonberg, accompanied by his young companion, the actor Joseph Keynes, disguised as a secretary. But secrecy was something Ludwig struggled with when it came to love. In a moment of foolish affection, he allowed a photographer in Lucerne to capture their portrait, a decision that would ignite a scandal and ultimately change the course of his life. In the photograph, Keynes sits comfortably in an ornate chair, one leg crossed, his posture relaxed and confident. Beside him stands Ludwig, the king of Bavaria, towering yet somehow diminished, his gaze not fixed on the camera, but lovingly directed at Keynes. The photograph defied royal protocol in every possible way. A monarch standing while a common actor sat. But it was their expressions that told the real story. Keynes looked into the lens with a faint, knowing smile. Ludwig's face revealed something far more dangerous: adoration, devotion, and helpless love. When copies of the photograph reached Munich, the reaction among Ludwig's ministers was immediate and furious. They weren't just scandalized by the breach of etiquette. They were terrified by what it revealed. After 2 decades of carefully maintained secrecy, the king's sexuality was suddenly visible to anyone who looked closely. Count Maximilian von Hohenstein, once a trusted friend and now a political enemy, saw his opportunity. He began gathering evidence, testimonies from dismissed servants, receipts for extravagant gifts to young men, and, most damning of all, excerpt from Ludwig's own diary stolen by a bribed valet. But Hohenstein knew that homosexuality alone would not be enough to dethrone a king. Bavaria was conservative, yes, but not without its hypocrisies. Such matters were often ignored as long as they remained discreet. To remove Ludwig from the throne, Hohenstein needed a stronger weapon: madness. That weapon came in the form of Dr. Bernhard von Gutten, Bavaria's most prominent psychiatrist and a man with ambitions of his own. Gutten had never met Ludwig, never examined him, never even stood in the same room with him. Yet in March 1886, he produced a detailed medical report diagnosing the king as insane. Every quirk and eccentricity of Ludwig's life was twisted into pathology. His nocturnal habits became symptoms of dementia, his love of theater delusions of grandeur, his same-sex relationships moral insanity. The report was not medicine, it was politics disguised as science. The truth was far simpler. Ludwig wasn't insane. He was inconvenient. His debts had reached catastrophic levels, 14 million marks, and his obsession with building fantastical castles was draining the royal treasury. But what truly alarmed his ministers was that Ludwig had stopped hiding who he was. His private world of midnight gatherings and secret loves was becoming too visible. The shadow kingdom he had built was being dragged into the light. The coup moved swiftly. On June 10th, 1886, Ludwig was declared insane and unfit to rule. His uncle, Prince Leopold, was appointed regent. A commission led by Dr. von Gudden was sent to Neuschwanstein Castle to arrest the king. Ludwig received word only hours before their arrival. His loyal servants begged him to flee Empress Elizabeth of Austria. His cousin and closest confidant had even arranged carriages waiting near the border. But Ludwig hesitated. Where would a deposed king go? He asked quietly. What life exists for a Ludwig who is no longer king of Bavaria? When the commission arrived at 4 in the morning on June 12th, they found Ludwig already awake, fully dressed, as if expecting them. For the first time, Dr. von Gudden came face to face with the man he had condemned. How can you declare me insane? Ludwig demanded. You have never examined me. Gudden's answer was chilling. It is unnecessary. The evidence is overwhelming. Ludwig was taken to Burg Castle on the shores of Lake Starnberg officially for treatment, but everyone knew it was a prison. 2 days later, on the evening of June 13th, Ludwig asked Dr. von Gudden to accompany him on a walk by the lake. The storm had just passed, the air cool and heavy. Gudden, perhaps out of guilt or arrogance, agreed and even dismissed the guards. The king is calm, he said. We need no protection from a broken man. The two set out around 6:30 p.m. By 8 o'clock, they had not returned. Searchers found their bodies in shallow water just 25 meters from shore. The scene raised more questions than it answered. The official verdict declared a murder-suicide. Ludwig had drowned Gudden, then himself. But Ludwig was a strong swimmer. The water was barely waist-deep, and his lungs contained no water. Gudden's face bore scratches and bruises, his neck signs of strangulation. Witnesses claimed Ludwig's coat, which mysteriously disappeared after the autopsy, had bullet holes in the back. The fisherman who discovered the bodies, Jacob Liddell, suddenly became wealthy within months, purchasing property and soon after becoming mayor. In papers found after his death, he confessed that he had been helping the king escape when a gunshot rang out. He fell forward into the water, Liddell wrote. I was told if I valued my family's lives, I saw nothing but 2 drowned men. Who fired that shot? Who paid for Liddell's silence? No one knows. To this day, the Bavarian government keeps certain files about Ludwig's death classified. In 2007, when researchers petitioned to unseal them, they were told the documents were too sensitive for public release. But perhaps the real mystery isn't how Ludwig died, it's why he had to die. He had already been deposed, already labeled insane. Why kill a powerless man unless he wasn't powerless at all? Perhaps he knew too much about other nobles, about the hidden world of privilege and desire that polite society refused to acknowledge. His death may have been less about madness and more about silence. In the aftermath, his private papers were seized and burned. Servants were dismissed with pensions and sworn to secrecy. His beloved Joseph Keynes left Bavaria forever, returning to the stage but never speaking publicly of the king again. When asked decades later about Ludwig, he said simply, "The king was the loneliest man I ever met. He built castles in the air because the real world had no place for him. Those castles, Neuschwanstein, Linderhof, Herrenchiemsee became his legacy. The same government that called him insane soon realized they were priceless. Within a few years, they were open to tourists. Today, Neuschwanstein alone earns Bavaria tens of millions of euros every year. The Mad King's folly became the nation's greatest treasure. And that is the cruelest irony. The man destroyed for his dreams has become the face of a fairy tale. Millions walk through his halls, photograph his grotto, and marvel at the beauty he built, yet few understand the pain behind it. Ludwig II, the so-called Mad King, was a man who dared to love in the shadows and to build beauty in defiance of a world that demanded conformity. The waters of Lake Starnberg still hold their secrets. Locals say that on foggy nights, soft lights sometimes shimmer on the surface like moonlight where no moon shines. They say it's Ludwig, still trying to reach that boat, still trying to escape to a world where kings can love freely, where night can be day, and where dreams can live forever. The Mad King is gone, but the dream king endures.